This is the July forecast overview from Planet Pulse. I'm Jeff Jower.
And I'm Rick Levine, and hey Jeff, another month.
Another month, an interesting month as usual.
An interesting month this month because we actually have a number of sign changes. And some planets change signs every month, but others do it less rarely, and we have some of those this month. And plus, we start the month with Mercury turning direct after 3 weeks being retrograde most of June, and it feels like pretty quickly we're moving into new territory, and I think we are.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, Rick, because July starts off on the 1st with the communication planet Mercury ending its 3+ week retrograde or backwards period when we're reviewing and reestablishing certain patterns. Now we get to move forward, and I think that's a major thrust at the beginning of the month that we see working on and off throughout the month.
Yeah, I think we're really moving into new territory, feels like.
Yeah.
Finally. I mean, this whole year started with these one retrogrades after another, and now we are moving into new territory. We have the sun for at least the first part of the month moving through the sign of Cancer. And the sun in Cancer, this is the kind of summer laziness, laying like the crabs at the beach with our bellies up. It's a crabby kind of thing to do, crabs on its back. But what's interesting about this month is that it starts off with the sun moving through Cancer, and it's hitting the remnants of the grand square and the ongoing square between Uranus and Pluto, because the sun opposes Pluto on July 4th. Happy birthday, America, or the United States. And it then squares Uranus on the 8th. And this brings up some of that stress, but there's a way that we can move with it this time, perhaps.
Right. I think what you're referring to is the fact, number one, that on July 8th, when the sun makes its square or challenging right angle to surprising, shocking Uranus, it also forms a harmonious trine to Saturn.
Yes.
Which gives shape and structure to what we're doing. But I think, as always with Cancer, part of the key is this. If we are stuck in the past, if we continue to celebrate the past, and Cancer is a sign of tradition, it's a sign of family, it's a sign of roots, but it is a cardinal season starting sign. And if we just aim to the past, then I think the displacement of these hard aspects to Pluto and Uranus is going to be even more stressful.
So it's almost like the illusion of safety in the past can create this air of, or water, but an air of fear that prevents us from moving into the future. And yet we can realize that the real movement of Cancer, because it does start a season, is knowing that the emotional security comes from inside, and that in these times we need to engage what's ahead.
Yeah, and I think we need to make good assessments of our habits and of the past and history, because we need to use the healthy parts of our inheritances psychologically, emotionally, physically, and yet recognize which of those patterns has essentially outlived its usefulness.
Well, and we get a chance to do that at the full moon, because the full moon always pits what we're feeling on the inside, the moon, against the objectivity of the sun being in Cancer now, and the moon being in Capricorn. It also has its sense of tradition, but it's also going somewhere.
Well, yeah, I think a big difference between Cancer and Capricorn, aside from the fact that Cancer tends to be sensitive and feeling-oriented, and Capricorn tends to be pragmatic, is that with a full moon in Capricorn, it's part of I think the recognition that there are certain hard things that we need to do which go against our emotional grain. I mean, Capricorns that...
And we just do them.
Right. That's right. We do them because they have to be done, even if we want to suck our thumb or hold on to our blankie and resist doing these hard things.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, the following day, on July 13th, Mercury, which is now moving direct, it had tipped into Cancer before it turned retrograde last month, and now Mercury is back in Cancer. And although this is a forward movement, it in a way kind of puts us into this kind of retentive, reflective Cancerian energy. It's kind of an interesting trick.
Yeah, and I think in times of profound change, it's natural to want to revert to that which is familiar and safe. But that full moon in Capricorn is conjunct Pluto. and Pluto will clear the decks. I mean, it's also at a right angle, I think, to Uranus. And so this particular full moon is really picking up on the transformational energies of that long-lasting Uranus-Pluto square. And even if mentally there is some regression with Mercury returning back into Cancer, Jupiter, the planet of the higher mind, is making a big move on the 16th, which makes me happy.
Well, it should, because Jupiter is the planet of happiness. In some ways, it's the planet of expansive, of bounty, of that buoyancy that we feel when we can go beyond our current state. And Jupiter for the last year has been in Cancer, where it's been kind of encouraging us to stay quiet or pull in or be reflective. And it's interesting because Jupiter, over the last few months and over the last year, being in Cancer was a key player in this Uranus-Pluto square that's been ongoing.
In season starting cardinal signs, of which Cancer is one.
That's right. And so we had Jupiter in the mix in cardinal or season starting Cancer, and we had Mars retrograde forever in the mix in cardinal or season starting Libra. And now on the 16th, Jupiter is an escapee. It removes itself from that kind of that stress and tension of that mix, and it goes into a place where it says, look at me, I'm actually feeling great. And it's really interesting because it does that, and then Mars follows suit a little bit later. We'll talk about that in a moment.
Well, that's right. One of the things I really like about Jupiter, the planet of belief, philosophy, and vision for the future, moving into fiery Leo, is that fire signs have to do with creating things that don't exist yet. And I think this forward thrust of fire, that being able to visualize and create realities based more on the future than stuck in the past, is certainly one of the positive, uplifting forces of this transit.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that we get a double dose of it when the Sun on the 22nd moves from Cancer to Leo, and by the 24th it catches up with Jupiter. And so it's like the Sun is at home in Leo, because Leo is the lion, the summer sun, the roar. Everything is out in the open. It's that presentation of the warmth and radiance of the Sun. And when the Sun moves into Leo, because Jupiter has just moved into Leo, we get that annual conjunction of the Sun and Jupiter in a sign that the Sun likes. This is a good day. You want to party that day?
Well, I think it's a party that can really lead to producing results. I mean, one of the negative sides of Jupiter and of fire is big promises without much follow-through. But we have a major shift near the end of the month on the 26th, when Mars, the planet of muscles, methods, digging in, getting done, the planet of action, has been skidding on the surface of Libra for 8 months.
8.5 months, yeah.
And
normally that's a 2-month transit, but because of Mars's retrograde, it stayed in Libra what seemed like forever.
Right, and Mars, the action planet, finds it hard to get a grip in Libra because it's so concerned with being smooth and being nice, and it's sort of antithetical to the pointedness of Mars. But on the 26th, Mars finally changes signs, as you said.
On the 25th, I think. Right in there. Yeah.
25th, you're right. But instead of a 2-month passage, Mars is a 3/4, 2/3 of a year passage through Libra is over, and Mars goes into Scorpio, where we can dig in, grab a hold of things, and really be, I think, more effective and efficient.
Yeah, in ancient astrology, Scorpio was one of Mars's home signs. And Mars, as the god of war, of assertion, and of aggression, means business when he's in Scorpio. I don't care about, how you're going to respond to my saying what I need. And if I need to step over you in order to get to where I'm going, Mars in Scorpio is willing to pay the price for asserting itself and or defending what it needs to defend. But Jeff, we skipped over something. I think it's really fascinating that we skipped over it because Venus moved into Cancer, where she's not very loud, and
the love planet gets quiet in cuddly Cancer
on the 18th. And somehow in this larger shuffle of Jupiter going into Leo and the Sun going into Leo and Mars going into Scorpio, it's like Cancer says, but what about me? You know, and I think that there's a little bit of that Cancerian, the ability to forget about the softer, more gentler sides, because we're distracted by how cool some of this other energy is.
Well, and I think even if Venus in Cancer is sort of desirous of this warm, cozy way of relating, she will, as she moves through the sign of Cancer, encounter an opposition with Pluto and a square with Uranus, which means Little Red Riding Hood needs to grow up. She needs to recognize that we are no longer living in the 15th century and that safety and love and relationships and nurturance can exist, but in different ways and in different forms than in the past.
So we have this ongoing square between Uranus and Pluto in cardinal signs that has been around for a couple of years, will be around for another year or so. Back in April, when the planets were moving through Aries and Jupiter, Aries season starting sign, and Jupiter was in Cancer season starting sign, and Mars was in Libra season starting sign, that square was rattled. Now, during this month, the Sun moves through Cancer, rattles that square. When Venus moves into Cancer, it, as you just said, is going to oppose Pluto at the 28th of the month. It doesn't square Uranus until early August, but it's still in the motion. And Mercury is hitting the square to Pluto, and the connection and the square to Pluto and to Uranus. The square to Pluto and Uranus. What do we got here?
See how crazy it is?
Okay, so Mercury in Cancer is hitting the opposition to Pluto and the square to Uranus around the 22nd to the 24th. And so the point of all of this is that even though we have some outward movement with the Sun moving into Leo and with Jupiter moving into Leo and some feisty movement with Mars moving into Scorpio, we're still not escaping from these larger issues of global and cultural and individual and relationship change that we've been playing with for a couple of years and still are.
Yeah, I'm sort of thinking of these planets in Cancer, particularly Mercury, the Sun, and Venus, are sort of like country bumpkins, you know, because of
compared to the heavyweights.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And what I'm thinking is keep your country bumpkin or your simple traditional values, but bring them up to big city modern methods. So you can be an innocent soul, but a forward-leaning and productive person in the modern world.
And by the last day of the month, on the 28th, we have that serious Venus opposite Uranus coming into the Venus opposite Pluto coming into the square to Uranus, which really can bring up relationship issues again. I mean, they've been on the plate all year. But on the last day of the month, Mercury, having run through the sign of Cancer, is now moving into Leo to join that Leo party, and there's another bump up in the realm of speaking and expressing ourselves in a way that's outgoing rather than holding the energy.
Yeah, and that gets a boost actually several days before the new moon, which is always a big event every month, on the 26th of July in Leo. A new fresh cycle of creativity and boldness is joined with Jupiter. So we can have that big heart thrust, the big picture feeling and view of things, but when Mercury gets in Leo, the detail-oriented planet of the lower mind maybe enable us to fill in some of the grandiose details.
So I think the overall sweep of this month is to, as we move forward in this sense of new wave of positive and outgoing energy, not to forget about the deeper stuff that we've been dealing with over the last few months. And it's not to hold on to it, but just to remember that that stuff ain't going away, that there's still this ongoing, the ongoing square between Uranus and Pluto, that's going to come in and out of consciousness still for quite a while. And there's a sense that it's okay to move on, but it's not meant to be a distraction. It's meant to be an enhancement. I'm Rick Levine.
And for Planet Pulse, I'm Jeff Jower.